The first thing I noticed was that the woman had brought 3 dresses. They hung from the hook inside the bridal suite at Belmere House, each one sealed inside a clear garment bag. One was pale blue, one was cream, one was dark green with a low back and thin straps. My engagement dress was already laid across the velvet bench beneath the window. Ivory silk, long sleeves, square neckline, 32 pearl buttons down the back. I had chosen it because Adrian said it looked timeless. The woman stood beside the dresses with one hand wrapped around an iced coffee. She was tall, narrow through the shoulders, and already wearing makeup suited for photographs. Soft bronze around the eyes, glossed lips, powder across her collarbones. Adrian rested his hand against the small of her back. He said, "Mara, you remember Celeste." I did. I had met her twice. Once at Adrian's architecture firm Christmas dinner, where she spent most of the evening leaning over his chair to show him pictures on her phone. Once at our apartment, when she arrived at 9:40 on a Sunday morning with a box of pastries and stayed until after lunch. Adrian had introduced her as an old friend from university. Now she had 3 dresses at our engagement photo session. I looked at the garment bags again. The photographer, Nessa Vale, stood near the vanity table checking batteries. Her assistant was arranging 2 camera bodies beside a row of lenses. Neither woman looked surprised to see Celeste. That told me they had been warned. I asked Adrian why Celeste had brought clothes. He gave me the same careful smile he used when explaining a design choice to a difficult client. He said she was going to appear in a few photographs. The room was quiet except for the small refrigerator humming beneath the counter. I asked what kind of photographs. Adrian said Belmere was too beautiful to waste, and Celeste needed updated portraits for her consulting website. Since we had already paid for the location and photographer, it made sense to take a few while we were there. He said it as though he had saved us money. Our engagement session had cost $3,800. I had paid the first deposit 9 months earlier. The second payment had left my account at 6 o'clock that morning. Belmere House had been reserved for us from 10 until 4. The contract named the purpose of the booking as a private engagement portrait session for Mara Ellison and Adrian Mercer. Not Adrian Mercer. Mara Ellison and his female friend with 3 dresses. I looked at Nessa. She lowered one of the batteries onto the table. She said Adrian had mentioned there might be an additional subject. I asked when. She glanced at him before answering. 2 days earlier. Adrian stepped closer and touched my elbow. He said he had planned to tell me, but I had been stressed all week. He had not wanted to make a small thing into a problem before the session. That sentence settled something inside me. He had not forgotten to tell me. He had decided I did not need to know. I had spent 5 months preparing for that day. I had chosen Belmere because the house had been built in 1912 and still held its original leaded windows. I had measured the afternoon light during our first visit. I had sent Nessa photographs of the West Terrace, the conservatory, and the long stone staircase descending into the orchard. I had ordered Adrian's jacket myself because the first one pulled across his shoulders. I had booked a room nearby for the night before, so we would not have to drive 90 minutes in morning traffic. I had steamed my own dress at 7:15 while Adrian slept. At 8:20, he had stood behind me in the hotel bathroom and fastened my pearl earrings. He told me I looked perfect. He did not mention Celeste. Celeste set her coffee down. She said she hoped I did not mind. Adrian had told her we would have plenty of time, and she only needed 10 or 15 minutes. Her voice was warm, almost apologetic. She was not behaving like a woman who believed she had done anything wrong. That mattered too. People often reveal more through comfort than confession. I worked as a digital archivist for the Renford Museum of Decorative Arts. My job was not glamorous. Most days, I sat beneath white lights and created high-resolution records of objects that would eventually outlive everyone who had handled them. I photographed cracked porcelain, silver tarnished black around the edges, letters written in fading ink, portraits damaged by humidity, smoke, careless storage, and time. I had learned to look at images in layers: foreground, background, reflections, shadows, negative space, the detail people intended to show, and the detail they accidentally left behind. Standing inside the bridal suite at Belmere House, I began reading the scene the same way. Celeste had not brought one emergency outfit. She had brought 3 coordinated looks. Nessa's assistant had a printed schedule clipped to a board. I could see blocks of time marked in blue ink: 10:30, conservatory; 11:15, west lawn; 12 o'clock, wardrobe change; 1:20, orchard; 2:10, library. Our original schedule had only one wardrobe change. I stepped toward the board and looked more closely. Beside the 12 o'clock entry, someone had written C in the margin. Beside 2:10, there were 2 sets of initials, AM and CR. Adrian noticed me reading it. He said the schedule was flexible. I turned to Celeste. Her last name was Rowan, CR. I asked how many photographs she expected to be in. She looked at Adrian again. Then she said she did not know. Whatever felt natural. Natural. The word sat between us like a stain spreading through paper. Adrian took my hand. His palm was warm. Mine was cold. He said we should not start the day with tension. He wanted everyone relaxed. He wanted the pictures to feel joyful. I asked if Celeste would be in photographs with him. He did not answer immediately. That was the answer. After 4 seconds, he said, "Oh, perhaps a few professional shots." They had been discussing a possible collaboration. He wanted images that showed creative partnership and trust. I asked why those photographs needed to be taken during our engagement session. He said because we were already there. I looked at the pearl buttons on my dress, then at Celeste's cream dress. It was not office clothing. It had a fitted waist, a soft skirt, and a neckline cut almost exactly like mine. The only difference was that hers had no sleeves. I asked whether she had chosen that dress before or after seeing mine. Celeste's mouth opened slightly. Adrian released my hand. He said I was becoming territorial over clothing. I said no. My voice sounded calm. That surprised him. I asked Nessa if she had received a separate shot list. She hesitated. Adrian said it did not matter. I asked her again. Nessa reached into her camera bag and removed a folded sheet of paper. She held it toward me. Adrian told her not to involve herself in a private disagreement. I took the page before she could pull it back. The list had been typed. There were 23 planned setups. 9 were for Adrian and me. 6 were for Celeste alone. 8 were for Adrian and Celeste together. The first line read, "Mara and Adrian, formal conservatory portraits." The 6th read, "Adrian and Celeste, walking through orchard, candid." The 10th read, "Adrian and Celeste, seated close in library window." The 17th reads, "Celeste wardrobe 2, Adrian jacket removed, West Terrace." The final line read, "Group option if Mara comfortable." I read the page twice. Not because I had misunderstood it, because I wanted to remember every word accurately. Adrian said the document made the plan look more formal than it was. Nessa needed examples so she could prepare. It did not mean they would use every idea. I asked who wrote it. Celeste said she had helped. Adrian added that she understood branding. I folded the page along its existing crease. Then I folded it again. I placed it on the vanity. At 10:18 that morning, 9 minutes before our first scheduled photograph, I understood that I was not the center of my own engagement session. I was the opening act. Adrian and I had been together for 5 years. We met when I was 28 and he was 31. I was cataloging a private collection of early 20th century furniture for the Renford Museum. He was working on the renovation of an old municipal theater 2 streets away. He came into the museum cafe during a thunderstorm because the construction site had lost power. Every table was occupied except mine. He asked if he could sit. I moved my stack of condition reports to the floor. He noticed a photograph clipped to the top page and asked why I had marked the corner of a carved cabinet in red. I explained that the red mark showed an old repair. The damage had been hidden beneath a decorative brass plate. He said buildings were the same. People covered cracks because repair was expensive and appearances were useful. I told him that covered damage was still damage. He smiled. He bought me coffee the next morning. For most of our relationship, Adrian was attentive in ways that seemed ordinary until I tried to list them. He filled my car when he noticed the fuel light. He kept ginger candies in his coat because I became nauseated on winding roads. He called my mother every year on her birthday without being reminded. When my father died 3 years into our relationship, Adrian sat beside me on the floor of my childhood bedroom and sorted 40 years of photographs into labeled boxes. He did not rush me. He did not complain. He held each image by the edges, because he knew fingerprints bothered me. 6 months later, he proposed inside the Renford Museum Conservation Studio after closing. He had arranged a small display case with photographs from our relationship, our first weekend trip, the apartment we rented together. My father laughing at a summer picnic, a picture of Adrian asleep on our couch with one hand resting on my ankle. At the center was an empty silver frame. He said it was for the next part. I said yes before he finished asking. The frame still sat on our bedroom dresser. We planned a wedding for the following spring. 112 guests, a ceremony in the glass atrium at Calder Hall, dinner beneath suspended lights. I had already ordered invitations. My mother had bought her dress. Adrian's parents had reserved rooms. Everything had weight. Deposits, names, dates, expectations. That was why I did not walk out of Belmere House the moment I saw Celeste's dresses. Leaving immediately would have been simple. Understanding required another few minutes. I needed to know whether I was seeing carelessness, arrogance, or something more settled. At 10:26, Nessa asked whether we wanted to begin in the conservatory. Adrian answered before I did. He said yes. Then he looked at Celeste and told her she could watch the first set to understand the lighting. Celeste picked up the cream garment bag. She said she might change now to save time. Adrian agreed. I watched them coordinate without looking at each other. That was the second thing I noticed. They did not need to discuss the plan because they had already discussed it. Nessa led me down the corridor toward the conservatory. Belmere House smelled of beeswax, old stone, and the white lilies arranged in bowls along the hallway. The morning was bright but cold. Light pressed through the tall windows in clean rectangles. I walked beside Nessa. She kept her voice low. She said she had assumed I knew. I asked what Adrian had told her. She said he described Celeste as a business partner and close family friend. He said I supported the collaboration. I asked whether he used the word family. She nodded. I said Celeste was not family. Nessa stopped walking. She apologized. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She had been given false information. That distinction mattered to me. The conservatory occupied the south corner of the house. Black iron framed the glass walls. Citrus trees stood in large clay pots. Condensation silvered the lower panes. Nessa positioned me near a stone bench. Her assistant adjusted the hem of my dress and placed my bouquet on the seat. The flowers were white ranunculus, rosemary, and pale green hellebore. Adrian came in 2 minutes later. He had removed his overcoat. He stood beside me and placed one arm around my waist. Nessa raised the camera. She asked us to look toward the windows. I looked. In the glass, I could see our reflection. Adrian's face was angled toward the door. He was waiting for Celeste. Nessa took 12 frames. The shutter clicked in short bursts. Adrian's hand moved higher against my back. He leaned close and said I needed to relax my shoulders. I said I was relaxed. He said I looked rigid. I asked what expression he expected from me. He exhaled through his nose. Nessa lowered the camera. She suggested we take a minute. Adrian said that was unnecessary. Then Celeste entered wearing the cream dress. The dress fell to mid-calf. She had changed her earrings and loosened her hair. Her coffee was gone. In its place, she carried a small bouquet of dried grass and white flowers. I knew that bouquet. It was one of two styling arrangements I had ordered from the florist. The second bouquet had been intended for detail photographs beside our invitation suite. Celeste held it against her waist. She asked if the color worked. Adrian smiled. Not the polite smile he gave clients. Not the careful smile he had given me upstairs. It was open and immediate. He said it was perfect. Nessa looked at me. I asked Celeste where she found the bouquet. She said Adrian gave it to her. I turned to him. He said we had two. I told him the second one was not spare. He said flowers did not understand ownership. That was the first cruel thing he said all day. It was mild enough that he probably did not hear it. I did. He looked at Nessa and asked whether the three of us could take one photograph together before moving outside. Nessa did not move. Celeste said she did not want to impose. Adrian told her she was not imposing. Then he looked at me. He said, "Mara, this does not have to be difficult." I studied his face. His eyes were clear. He was not confused. He was not embarrassed. He believed my discomfort was the only problem in the room. I asked him to step into the hallway with me. He said we could talk there. I said no. My voice was quiet. He followed me. The hallway was empty except for a marble table and a brass lamp shaped like a crane. Through the open conservatory door, I could hear Nessa checking camera settings with her assistant. I asked Adrian how long he and Celeste had been planning this. He said planning was an exaggerated word. I asked again. He rubbed one hand across his jaw. Then he said 3 weeks. 3 weeks earlier, I had sat beside him at our kitchen table and shown him the final schedule. He had asked whether the orchard photographs could happen before lunch, because he became irritable when hungry. I moved them. He had watched me print the new version. He had said nothing about Celeste. I asked why he hid it. He said because he knew I would react like this. I asked what this meant. He said suspicious, possessive, unable to separate personal feelings from practical opportunities. I looked through the doorway. Celeste stood beneath the glass ceiling while Nessa's assistant adjusted the flowers in her hands. She looked like a bride waiting for instructions. I asked Adrian whether he was sleeping with her. He looked offended. He said no. I believed him. At least, I believed he had not slept with her yet. The betrayal was not a hotel receipt or a hidden message. It was visible. He had given another woman space inside an event meant to mark his commitment to me. He had lied to the photographer. He had assigned her almost half the schedule. He had given her flowers I purchased. He had watched her enter wearing a dress that echoed mine and called her perfect. He had arranged all of it while assuming I would eventually accept it, because refusing would be awkward. I asked if he loved her. He said that was not a fair question. I said it was simple. He said he loved me. I waited. He added that Celeste understood parts of him I did not. There it was, the hidden brass plate over the crack. I asked which parts. He said ambition, creative risk, the future he wanted for his work. I reminded him that I had supported his work for 5 years. I had proofread proposals at midnight. I had moved vacations around deadlines. I had used part of my father's small inheritance to cover our rent when his firm delayed salary during restructuring. Adrian said support was not the same as understanding. I asked what Celeste understood that required engagement photographs. He said I was reducing everything to appearances. I almost laughed. We were standing at a photo session. Appearances were the entire purpose. He stepped closer. His voice softened. He said the morning had become emotional, but it could still be repaired. We could take our photographs, let Celeste have a few, and discuss boundaries later. Boundaries later. After the images existed, after the schedule had been completed, after I had been trained to accept what he had already decided. I asked whether he would remove Celeste from the session. He looked past me toward the conservatory. He did not answer. I asked once more. He said no. Not because he chose her over me, he explained. Because asking her to leave would be humiliating and unprofessional. I nodded. He looked relieved. He thought the discussion had ended. I went back inside. Nessa asked whether we wanted to continue. I looked at the two cameras hanging from her shoulders. I asked whether she shot tethered. She said yes. Her assistant was saving copies to a laptop in the small library beside the conservatory. I asked whether she also kept the raw files on both memory cards. She said she did. Adrian frowned. He asked why that mattered. I ignored him. I asked Nessa to take 3 minutes of test frames with no one in the conservatory. Empty bench, empty windows, empty stone floor, wide angles and matching close exposures. She understood immediately. Photographers who work with composites understand the value of clean plates. A clean plate is an image of a scene without the subject. It allows a person or object to be removed later while preserving the background. Nessa looked at Adrian. He asked what I was doing. I said I was making sure I had options. I stepped out of the frame. Nessa photographed the empty conservatory from every planned angle. The bench without my dress. The windows without our reflections. The citrus trees without Adrian standing between them. The second she finished, I walked back to my mark. I told her we could continue. Adrian stared at me. Celeste shifted her bouquet from one hand to the other. For the next 42 minutes, I did exactly what was expected. I stood beside my fiancé beneath the glass roof. I placed my hand against his chest. I looked toward the light. I walked with him between rows of citrus trees. I sat on the stone bench while he leaned beside me. I rested my head near his shoulder without touching it. Nessa worked quickly. She gave little direction. Her assistant said almost nothing. Adrian began relaxing again. He believed cooperation meant forgiveness. At 11:14, Nessa moved us toward the west lawn. Cold wind came across the fields. The grass was wet enough to darken the edge of my dress. Adrian offered me his hand on the stone steps. I took it because falling would have complicated the day. Celeste followed behind us in a wool coat. At the bottom of the steps, Adrian asked Nessa to photograph him and Celeste walking toward the orchard while the light was good. Nessa looked at me. I said she should follow the agreed schedule. Adrian corrected me. He said the updated schedule. I said yes. The updated one. Celeste removed her coat. Adrian stood beside her. Nessa photographed them walking along the gravel path. They moved easily together. Too easily. He tilted his head when she spoke. She touched his forearm when she laughed. At one point, wind blew hair across her face, and he reached over to move it. Nessa stopped pressing the shutter. Adrian noticed. He lowered his hand. I stood near a stone planter holding my bouquet. The wet stems chilled my fingers. I watched without confronting them. I did not need another confession. I needed evidence for myself. Not evidence to post, not evidence to send his parents. Evidence I could remember later, when loneliness might attempt to rewrite the day. At 11:32, Nessa photographed Adrian and Celeste seated on a low orchard wall. He removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She said she was fine. He told her she was shivering. I had been standing in the wind for 18 minutes in a silk dress. He did not look at me. At 11:40, I asked Nessa's assistant to photograph the empty wall. Adrian heard me. He asked whether this was some kind of passive-aggressive performance. I said no. It was documentation. He told me I was making everyone uncomfortable. I looked at Celeste. She looked away. I said I had not invited everyone. Lunch had been arranged in the Belmere breakfast room. 2 place settings waited at the main table. A third had been added at the end. There were linen napkins, mushroom soup, roasted chicken, and small lemon cakes dusted with sugar. Adrian sat beside me. Celeste sat across from him. Nessa and her assistant ate in the kitchen with the venue coordinator. For the first 5 minutes, no one spoke. Then Celeste said she did not want to be the cause of conflict. I cut a piece of chicken. I told her conflict required 2 competing positions. My position had never been requested. Adrian said that was exactly the kind of language that made simple conversations impossible. I asked him when the simple conversation had happened. He set down his fork. Celeste said Adrian had described the session as flexible. She thought I knew. I told her Nessa thought the same thing. Her face changed. She looked at Adrian. He said he had assumed I would understand once we were all together. Celeste asked him whether he had actually told me. He said there had not been a good time. She leaned back in her chair. For the first time that day, she looked uneasy. She said he told her I was excited about helping with the brand images. Adrian said I had been supportive of the consulting project. I said I had learned about the consulting project 20 minutes earlier. Celeste stared at him. He told her not to let my mood distort the facts. I took a sip of water. The glass left a cold ring against my fingers. Celeste asked what else he had said that was not true. Adrian's face tightened. He said this was not productive. I realized then that Celeste was not my rival in the way he wanted both of us to believe. She was another audience. He had told her one version. He had told me nothing. He stood between us, managing information so each woman's cooperation appeared voluntary. Celeste removed the dried flower bouquet from the chair beside her and placed it on the table. She said she would leave after lunch. Adrian said that was unnecessary. She said it was necessary for her. He told her she was overreacting. The word sounded familiar. He had used it with me in the hallway. I looked at her. She met my eyes for the first time without defensiveness. I told her she did not need to leave on my behalf. She said she was not leaving on my behalf. She was leaving because she had agreed to something under false terms. Adrian pushed his chair back. The legs scraped against the floor. He said both of us were turning a scheduling mistake into a character trial. I said it was not a scheduling mistake. He had built a day around 2 women and told each woman the other had agreed. He said that was an unfair summary. I said it was exact. He left the room. The door closed behind him without slamming. Celeste sat across from me with her hands folded beside her plate. After a minute, she said she and Adrian had kissed once. She said it happened 6 weeks earlier in the parking garage beneath his office. He stopped it. Then he told her our relationship had become more like a partnership than a romance. He said we were discussing whether marriage still made sense. I had never discussed that with him. 2 nights after the kiss, Adrian and I attended our menu tasting. He held my hand beneath the table. He chose pear tart for dessert. When we returned home, he spent 40 minutes comparing honeymoon flights. Celeste said nothing else physical had happened. She believed his relationship with me was ending slowly and privately. She believed the engagement photographs were partly a formality for our families and partly a chance for him to complete a public commitment before we decided what came next. The explanation made no sense because it had been designed not to make sense. Adrian had given her just enough sadness to justify closeness. He had given me just enough stability to continue planning a wedding. He had left both paths open. I asked whether she wanted him. She looked down at the table. She said she had. Past tense. She stood. She removed a small velvet box from her handbag and placed it beside the dried bouquet. Inside was a pair of antique gold cufflinks. She had bought them for Adrian to wear during their photographs. She said she would collect her dresses and call a car. I told her the cream one suited her. She gave me a tired smile. Then she left. I remained at the table. I finished the mushroom soup because I had eaten nothing since 6:30 that morning. At 12:22, Nessa entered. She asked whether we were continuing. I said yes. She glanced toward the empty chair. I told her Celeste was leaving. Nessa nodded. I asked how many usable images she had of Adrian and me. She estimated 160. I asked how many clean plates she had captured. 38. I said I needed more. She sat across from me. She asked what I intended to do. I told her I wanted every final frame delivered in 2 versions. The original, and one without me. She did not speak for several seconds. Then she said removing me from every image would require significant editing. I said I understood. Restoration work was part of my profession. I could complete the composites myself if she released the raw files under a revised license. She said the contract did not allow raw file delivery. I reminded her that the contract was in my name. I was the client. I was willing to pay an additional licensing fee. She studied my face. Then she said she could release duplicate RAW files with a limited personal use amendment. I asked her to prepare it before we left. Adrian returned at 12:31. He had been outside. His hair was damp from mist. He asked where Celeste was. I said she was collecting her things. He looked toward the doorway. I told him she knew about the session now. The real version. His face hardened. He asked what I had said. I told him I had not needed to say much. She told me about the kiss. He sat down. The chair Celeste had used was still pulled away from the table. He chose the one beside me instead. He said the kiss was a mistake. I agreed. He said it lasted less than 10 seconds. I said duration was not the important measurement. He told me he had planned to confess after the photographs. I asked before or after the invitations went out. He had no answer. He said he was confused. I said he was organized. That was different. He arranged schedules. He assigned outfits. He briefed the photographer. He prepared separate stories. Confused people hesitate. He had executed a plan. He pressed his palms against his eyes. For the first time all day, he looked tired. He said he did not want to lose me. I told him he had been willing to place me beside the woman he kissed and photograph us together without telling either of us the truth. He said he had imagined that if the three of us spent time together, the tension would disappear. I asked what tension. He admitted Celeste had been pulling away since the kiss. He thought the session would reassure her that everything could remain normal. I asked what normal meant. He said he did not know. I did. Normal meant I stayed his fiancée. Celeste stayed close enough to understand the parts of him I supposedly did not. He received loyalty from one woman and possibility from another. Neither of us was allowed enough information to choose. I stood. Adrian reached for my wrist. He stopped before touching me. He asked whether I was ending the engagement. I looked through the window toward the lawn. Celeste was walking down the gravel drive in her wool coat. One of the garment bags hung over each shoulder. The third dragged slightly behind her. A black car waited near the gate. I said I was finishing the photographs. He stared at me. I told him we had paid for 6 hours. The weather was clearing. Nessa was ready. I wanted the record. He asked what kind of record. I said an accurate one. At 12:48, we returned to the west lawn. The mist had thinned. Water shone along the stone balustrade. Nessa photographed Adrian and me beneath an old cedar tree. He stood close, but did not touch me until instructed. When his hand settled at my waist, I felt nothing romantic, only pressure through fabric. Nessa asked us to walk toward the house. We did. Adrian said under his breath that he was sorry. I looked straight ahead. I said I knew. He asked whether I believed him. I said I believed he was sorry the arrangement had failed. He said that was cruel. I said it was precise. At 1:20, I changed into my second dress. It was dark blue with a narrow belt and a high neckline. I had chosen it because Adrian liked the color. I nearly left it hanging in the bridal suite. Then I put it on. The dress belonged to me. His preference did not. While Nessa's assistant pinned my hair, Adrian waited in the corridor. I could hear him making phone calls. Celeste did not answer. His mother did. He told her the session had become complicated because Mara was upset about a misunderstanding. I stood. I opened the door. He ended the call. I told him not to use my name as a cover for his choices. He said he needed someone to talk to. I said then he should tell them what happened. He said his mother would not understand. I said she might understand more than he wanted. We went to the library. Dark shelves covered 3 walls. A green velvet sofa stood beneath the center window. Dust floated in the light. Nessa had planned seated portraits there. I asked her to photograph the room empty first. Adrian sat on the sofa while she took the clean plates. He looked diminished against the high shelves. When I joined him, he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Nessa asked us to sit closer. I moved 6 inches toward him. She asked for another 6. I did not move. She took the photograph anyway. The shutter sounded once, not a burst. 1 frame. Adrian looked at me. He said we did not have to continue pretending. I told him I was not pretending. I was completing the process. He asked why. I said because unfinished images invite fantasy. People imagine the missing part was better than it was. I wanted to see exactly what the end looked like. For the next 2 hours, we moved through Belmere House. The blue drawing room, the east staircase, the covered terrace, the stone archway near the orchard. At each location, Nessa photographed the scene before I entered. Then she photographed Adrian and me. Sometimes she captured him alone while I adjusted my dress or moved between marks. By 3:10, the sky had cleared completely. Late sunlight stretched across the grass. Our final location was the long, reflecting pool behind the house. The water was still, except for leaves drifting near the edge. Nessa positioned us on the narrow path beside it. Adrian asked whether we could have 5 minutes alone. I said no. Nessa remained 20 feet away. He said he had been unhappy for months. I asked why he accepted the engagement session. He said he hoped commitment would settle him. I asked why he kissed Celeste. He said he wanted to feel wanted without responsibility. The honesty was late, but it was honest. I looked at his reflection in the pool. The water made his outline tremble. He said I had become distant after my father died. I reminded him that my father died 2 years earlier. He said grief changed the shape of our relationship. I said perhaps it did. He said Celeste made him feel light. I said then he should have become single before asking her to carry that weight. He closed his eyes. He said he did love me. I told him love without truth had no safe place to stand. Nessa called that the light was fading. Adrian asked what happened when we returned home. I said I would stay at Belmere that night. He would return to the apartment. The next morning, I would collect my personal documents and clothing while he was at work. He asked about the wedding. I said there would be no wedding. His face changed slowly. Until that moment, I think he believed the day could still become a story we survived. He said we could postpone. I said no. He said counseling. I said no. He asked whether 5 years meant so little. I said 5 years were exactly why I would not spend a sixth teaching him that deception had limits. He looked toward the house. Then he asked whether I wanted the ring back from him. I looked at my left hand. The diamond caught the last sunlight. I had forgotten I was wearing it. I removed it. The band left a pale mark around my finger. I placed the ring in his palm. He closed his hand around it. Nessa took no photograph. I was grateful for that. Some moments should not become content. We completed the final 3 frames, standing apart beside the pool. No touching, no smiles. Adrian looked toward the water. I looked at the camera. At 3:37, Nessa lowered it. She said we were finished. Adrian walked back toward the house alone. I remained beside the pool. Nessa came to stand near me. She said she could prepare the raw files by the following afternoon. I told her there was no rush. She said there usually was. People wanted engagement photographs immediately. I looked at the reflection of the empty sky. I told her these were not engagement photographs anymore. They were source material. That evening, I stayed in the West guest room at Belmere House. The venue coordinator brought me tea and a plate of bread with salted butter. She did not ask questions. My blue dress hung from the wardrobe door. My ivory dress lay across a chair. At 6:10, Adrian sent a message saying he had reached the apartment. At 6:23, he said he had told his parents the wedding was postponed. I replied that it was canceled. At 6:31, he asked whether we could wait 48 hours before telling anyone else. I did not answer. At 7:05, my mother called. Adrian's mother had contacted her. I told her the facts in 6 sentences. Adrian brought Celeste to the engagement session. He had kissed her 6 weeks earlier. He lied to both of us. He planned joint photographs with her. The engagement was over. I was safe. My mother was quiet. Then she asked whether I wanted her to drive to Belmere. I said no. She said she would keep her phone beside the bed. At 8:40, Celeste sent me an email. She apologized for participating in the day. She attached screenshots of 11 messages from Adrian. I opened them once. He described our engagement as fragile. He said I was emotionally unavailable. He said I supported the photo session. He said I admired Celeste's work. He said I thought the three of us would photograph well together. In one message, he wrote that I might seem cold at first, but I always adjusted once I understood his reasoning. That sentence stayed with me, not because it was insulting, because it was how he had built our relationship. He made decisions. I adjusted. He waited for time to soften my objections. By morning, discomfort became compromise. By the next week, compromise became history. He relied on my composure as though it were consent. At 9:12, I closed the email. I did not reply to Celeste. I did not need more details. At 10:30 the next morning, I drove back to Renford. I entered the apartment while Adrian was at his office. The rooms looked unchanged, 2 mugs in the sink, his shoes near the door, my coat hanging beside his. The silver frame from his proposal still sat on the bedroom dresser, empty. I packed 3 suitcases and 4 archive boxes. Clothing. Documents, my father's photographs, the ceramic bowl my mother made, the books with my notes in the margins. I left furniture behind. I left the wedding binder on the kitchen table. I removed my name from the utility accounts. I contacted Calder Hall, the florist, the caterer, and the hotel. The cancellation fees totaled $14,670. I paid my share. Adrian paid his. I did not argue over money. The cost was painful. Remaining engaged would have cost more. For 6 weeks, I lived in my mother's guest room. The wallpaper was pale yellow. At night, pipes clicked inside the wall. I returned to work 3 days after Belmere. My first assignment was a damaged family portrait from 1938. Water had erased most of a woman standing at the left edge. Only one hand remained against the shoulder of the man beside her. The curator wanted a digital reconstruction for the exhibition catalog. I spent 9 days rebuilding the missing wall, curtain, and floor. I could have recreated the woman from reference photographs. I did not. The goal was conservation, not invention. Absence was part of the object's history. On the 7th day, Nessa delivered the engagement files. There were 1,482 raw images, 211 photographs of Adrian and me, 83 of Adrian and Celeste, 46 of Celeste alone, 72 clean plates. The rest were tests, details, and duplicates. Nessa included the revised license. She also returned half of the creative fee. I told her she did not need to. She said the session had not been what she agreed to photograph. I accepted the refund. I stored the original files on an encrypted drive. Then I created a new folder. I named it Belmere Final. Every evening after work, I edited for 1 hour, no more. I did not want the project to consume my life. I began with the conservatory. In the first image, Adrian and I stood between 2 citrus trees. His hand rested at my waist. My face was turned toward the window. I opened the matching clean plate. I aligned the iron window frames. I masked my outline. I rebuilt the leaves behind my shoulder. I restored the stone floor beneath my dress. I removed the faint shadow cast by my body. When I finished, Adrian stood alone in the conservatory. His hand rested awkwardly in empty air. I edited that too. I lowered his arm. The final image looked natural. A man in a dark suit standing alone between 2 trees. In the second frame, we sat on the stone bench. I removed myself. The space beside him became empty stone. He was looking slightly toward where my face had been. Without me there, his expression looked uncertain. In the orchard photographs, I erased my blue dress from the gravel path. I rebuilt grass. I restored the lower branches of apple trees. I removed my reflection from windows, my shadow from steps, my hand from his chest, my face from the library glass, my sleeve from the edge of the frame. My bouquet remained in 3 images because it belonged to the scene. In others, I removed it too. Each edit was clean, no blurred outlines, no fragments, no ghosting. I had spent 12 years learning how to make absence believable. By the 3rd week, I had removed myself from every usable frame. Not cropped, not covered, removed. The photographs no longer documented an engagement. They documented Adrian alone in beautiful rooms, waiting beside empty benches, walking down empty paths, standing near a reflecting pool with open space where another person should have been. I did not post them. I did not send them to friends. I did not use them to shame him. I exported the full set in high resolution. Then I created a second folder containing the photographs of Adrian and Celeste. I edited those lightly. Exposure, white balance, straightened horizons, no manipulation. They looked exactly as they had looked that day. Comfortable, close, unprepared for the truth. At the end of the 6th week, Adrian emailed me. He asked to meet. I agreed to 20 minutes in the cafe beside Renford Station. He arrived early. He wore the gray coat I bought him the previous winter. He had lost weight. I had cut my hair to my shoulders. He noticed. We sat near the window. He said Celeste had ended the consulting project. She had also stopped speaking to him. I said I knew nothing about that. He said his firm had paused the collaboration after learning the branding images were taken during a private engagement booking without the client's informed consent. I asked whether Nessa reported him. He said no. Celeste had. The firm did not fire him. They removed him from client-facing projects for 2 months. I said nothing. That consequence belonged to his choices, not mine. He asked whether I hated him. I said no. He asked whether that meant there was a chance. I said no. He looked down at his coffee. He said he kept returning to the moment I gave him the ring. He had believed I would cry. He had believed anger would mean attachment. My calm frightened him. I told him calm was not the absence of pain. It was the form my decision took. He nodded. Then he asked about the photographs. I said they were finished. He looked surprised. He asked whether he could see them. I had brought a small drive in my handbag. I placed it on the table. He picked it up. I told him it contained every final image from Belmere. He asked whether there were photographs of us. I said no. His fingers tightened around the drive. I told him I removed myself from every frame. He stared at me. I explained the clean plates, the masking, the reconstruction, the hours. He asked why I would do that. I said because the session showed me that he had already imagined a future where I remained present only when convenient. I had corrected the record. He said the images would look empty. I told him they looked accurate. He closed his eyes. For a moment, I thought he might cry. He did not. He asked whether I kept the originals. I said yes. He asked what I would do with them. I said nothing. They were evidence of a life I had completed, not material for another one. He turned the drive between his fingers. He said the proposal frame was still on the dresser. I told him he could keep it. He said it had been meant for our wedding photograph. I said now it could hold whichever picture he chose. He looked through the cafe window. A train moved slowly behind the glass. He asked whether I had met someone else. I said no. He seemed relieved. I did not correct the relief. My life did not need another man to validate leaving him. Our 20 minutes ended. I stood. Adrian asked whether we would ever speak again. I told him I did not know. That was the only uncertainty I gave him. Outside, the wind had turned cold. I walked toward the museum. I did not look back. 3 months later, I rented a small apartment above a tailor's shop on Linden Row. The floors tilted toward the windows. The kitchen had one narrow counter. The bedroom faced east. I bought a second-hand oak table and placed it beneath the largest window. My mother brought the ceramic bowl. Nessa mailed me one printed photograph. It was the empty conservatory at Belmere. No Adrian, no Celeste, no me. Just winter light across the stone bench and 2 citrus trees rising beneath the glass. She wrote nothing inside the envelope. I framed the photograph in the silver frame Adrian had used when he proposed. The empty frame was no longer empty. On the first morning of spring, sunlight reached through my apartment window and struck the glass. For a second, the conservatory appeared to glow. I stood beside the table with a cup of coffee warming both hands. There was no person missing from the photograph. There was only space. Clean, quiet, mine.